Good evening. 4 years into Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, let us speak without diplomatic gloves, let us speak without hesitation and without euphemisms. This is not a conflict. It is a war of aggression soaked in war crimes and brutality. There is one victim, Ukraine, and there is an axis of aggressors sustaining this brutality. Cities reduced to rubble, mass graves uncovered, torture documented, and more than 20,000 children, Ukrainian children, abducted, stolen from their families and from the country where the aggressor tries to erase its future. This is not a collateral damage. This is deliberate suffering inflicted on a nation whose only crime is their choice to live free. Let it be remembered, Ukraine stands not only for itself, but for the dignity of Europe and the principles of a world that must not surrender to terror and tyranny. To remain silent is complicity. To hesitate is betrayal of truth, of justice, and of future itself. And history will not judge us by what we knew, but what we chose to do or not to do when it mattered most. This is the reality that brings us here today. Welcome to the International Conference, 4 Years of Aggression, Ukraine's Resistance and the World's Responsibility. Today we have gathered a select group of people from different parts of Europe and of the United States of America to speak in 3 thematic sections, out of which the first one will be navigated by our dear friend, somebody you know very well, Mr. Roger Casale, former British ambassador, member of Parliament, and the director of the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine. Throughout this event, we will give more details about what we are doing and how we are doing that together with our audience, with our friends, with our partners and colleagues. But first of all that you're watching, go to the Read More section of the YouTube channel that you're watching right now or on Facebook and find the link to the declaration and the link how to support it. During this conference, we will also follow our audience, their questions, their comments, and may the time allow that, we will also pick some of the questions and comments. For that to happen, my dear colleague, the Foreign Affairs editor of the Civil Media Platform, Dragan Mishev, will help us do that. So once again, welcome to this conference. Let us not hesitate and let us give the floor to Mr. Roger Casale, our dear friend, who will navigate us through the first thematic section. Roger, here you are.
Thank you very much, Jabir. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for arranging today's event. Thank you to you and your team. Thank you to everyone who's with us here for this event, and thank you to all of you watching at home. Thank you for being with us to remember. Thank you for being with us to act, and thank you for being with us to take responsibility. Because 4 years on from the brutal invasion of Ukraine, it is a very somber, sobering, serious moment. And we know, I think, that part of the reason for that is there is no end in sight. And so this display of solidarity today, small as it is, humble as we are, I know is deeply meaningful to our friends and to those who we work with and have stood alongside in Ukraine, not just for the last 4 years, but for many years before that, and who we will stand with not just for the next 4 years, but many years beyond that as well. And the first thing I want to ask you to do before I introduce our panel is indeed to remember. And just to reflect for a moment. I wonder if you can remember, I'm sure you can, where you were and what you were doing 4 years ago today when Russia invaded Ukraine. And how did it make you feel? And how do you feel now? And what I remember, I was in Rome. It was a lovely spring day, and it was warm in Rome, freezing cold in Kiev that night as it is tonight, freezing, below freezing. But it was warm in Rome. And there was a protest gathered outside the Russian embassy, and I went and stood with that protest. But I remember thinking how unprepared we were, how unaware we were of the real danger, how unexpected this invasion was. My organization, New Europeans, had been working for a number of years to show support for Ukraine and draw attention to the dangers there, the danger to freedom and democracy in Ukraine. And I can remember just a week or two before getting a message from a petition organization that we were working with who I wanted to run a petition. This was before the 24th of February 2022, to get solidarity for Ukraine in the face of the danger. And they said, nobody's interested in Ukraine. Nobody's really interested. We can't do that. And 2 weeks later, we saw the Russian invasion. We were not prepared. We were not expecting it. We were not aware. 4 years on, the Russian aggression continues. So many people have died. We would take a moment to remember and to really stand in awe of the resilience of the Ukrainian people themselves and the courage they have shown and the resilience they have shown. And we hold to account Putin, the man who is responsible, solely responsible for this aggression. And we recognize that this is now not just a war against Ukraine. In fact, it never was. It's a war against Europe. It's a war against the values that make us European. The values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And in standing with Ukraine, we are standing in defense of those values. It's not just about Ukraine, it's about ourselves. And the action I would ask you to take today is indeed, as Shabir has just said, to go onto the defendingdemocracy.global website and to put your name to the declaration, to stand with Ukraine and to keep standing with Ukraine. And today I speak to you from London, where the British Prime Minister and the French President launched a coalition of the willing. And we in the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine, we are looking to support the work of the British government, the French government, and the 31 governments who are part of the coalition of the willing where we can, by mobilizing parliamentary support and public support behind the aims of the coalition of the willing, which are to support Ukraine now and in the future, both militarily and through building capacity and through putting troops onto the ground, because when there is eventually a ceasefire, we don't know when it will come, but one day the violence will stop and a political process, one hopes, can begin. No agreement that Putin will sign will be worth very much unless it is backed up by force. And so the coalition of the willing wants to do that. But I think what we also recognize is that Europe also needs to be ready to defend itself. Today, we are more engaged, we are more aware than we were 4 years ago, but we are still not prepared. We are not doing enough to support Ukraine's security, its economy, or the people of Ukraine. The idea of a reconstruction of Ukraine without a focus on rebuilding the Ukrainian people is fanciful. There is a huge task ahead of us all to mobilize to support Ukraine in the future as well as today, and to recognize that the threat is not just to Ukraine but to ourselves, and to recognize that we, just as we were not prepared 4 years ago, we in Europe are not prepared today. And I don't say that we should blame ourselves for that. I don't say that we should blame our politicians for that. But I do say that we need to take responsibility. You watching this and me and all of us here in the Westminster Alliance, all of us in Europe, all of us across the world, we need to ask ourselves, has the moment come when we need to take responsibility for what comes next? And perhaps that means increased defense spending. Perhaps that means increased taxation. I don't know. I don't want to make a political point. I want to make a point about the moral responsibility that we have and the self-interest that we have to defend Ukraine and to defend ourselves. And what that means is being prepared, and we are not prepared, and time is running out. So I hope today we will also hear about that. But the main point about today is to mark this somber, serious occasion with, as we once again come together to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, to take the small actions but meaningful actions that we can take, such as signing the declaration, to renew our commitment to stand with Ukraine in the future, and to call on the world to take responsibility, to defend Ukraine, whatever it takes, now and in the future, because in defending Ukraine, we are defending ourselves and we are defending the values of democracy and the rule of law and freedom on which the free world depends. So thank you for standing with us today. And I'm delighted now to introduce our panel, our first panel, and our first intervention will be from the Ukrainian ambassador to North Macedonia, to Skopje, Larissa Dia. Thank you, Larissa. And this is a pre-recorded message. Larissa is not able to be with us live, and she's very kindly recorded this message for us, which I wanted to have right at the start of our panel. Larissa, thank you.
Good afternoon, dear participants, dear friends of Ukraine and freedom. Thank you for having me here today. It's an honor to have the opportunity to address you on this day of solidarity with Ukraine. Today marks the 4th anniversary of the beginning of Russia's unlawful and unprovoked full-scale military invasion of Ukraine. Today, Ukraine continues to face a war of aggression that deliberately targets not only our states, but the very foundations of civilian life. Russia targets pedestrians, civilians' vehicles, residential buildings, public transport, medical facilities and rescue staff every day. Locals call this terror a human safari, in which drones are used to track, hunt and terrorize people. Russian forces systematically target Ukraine's critical civilian infrastructure, focusing on their destruction of energy facilities, logistic networks and residential areas. This January alone, Russia launched more than 6,000 attack drones, more than 5,000 guided aerial bombs and 160 missiles of various types against Ukraine. Virtually all military targets, but the energy sector, the railways and other infrastructure that sustains normal life. Among the most tragic consequences of this aggression is the fate of Ukrainian children. With the war of aggression unleashed by Russia against Ukraine, our children became immediate and the most vulnerable target of Russian aggression. The Kremlin regime continues its criminal practice of forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children. As of today, approximately 1.6 million Ukrainian children remain under Russian control, while Russia provides no information about their whereabouts. We are dealing not only with physical abduction, but with a centralized attempt to erase their Ukrainian identity. Russian authorities change children's citizenship, transfer them to Russian families, prevent them from leaving Russia, and deliberately destroy their ties and memories, connected with Ukraine. These actions represent a deliberate ethnic cleansing campaign in violation of the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and those responsible must face justice. In this regard, North Macedonia plays an important role. North Macedonia possesses sufficient political and legal capacity to contribute to the restoration of justice in Ukraine and has already taken a number of concrete steps on the international stage. We highly appreciate that North Macedonia has joined the core group working on the establishment of a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine following the political decision taken in Lviv to move forward with the creation of this tribunal in The Hague, which will prosecute the leadership of the Russian Federation for the crime of aggression. This is a devastating war that has profoundly reshaped international relations and changed life in Europe, divided it into a clear before and after. With the launch of Russia-unprovoked full-scale armed aggression against Ukraine, millions of civilians became victims of shelling, torture and occupation. Destroyed cities, burnt villages and shattered infrastructure have become the tragic reality of the 21st century in the very center of Europe. At the same time, Ukraine today is not only defending itself, with its strong potential and defense industry, and with an army that is the only one in Europe with real combat experience of a full-scale war, Ukraine is a key pillar of Europe's self-sufficiency. Stable and predictable assistance to Ukraine is what can genuinely push Moscow toward diplomacy. Sanctions on Russia, sustained support for Ukraine, and the strengthening of our collective defense all together contribute to peace. We must ensure that time works against Russia through our coordinated joint actions. Thank you for your support and for your attention.
And back to you, Roger. This was Larissa Dir, the ambassador of Ukraine to North Macedonia. Can I suggest now to go to from Skopje to Kyiv? So we were in London, now in Skopje with the ambassador.
Yes, absolutely. Would you like me to introduce Katya Pavlova?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So we thank Ambassador Dia for that contribution, and we remember this is a time, really, this is a day of all days when it's right to hold to account, to hold the Putin and the Russian regime to account. And we hope that one day they will be brought to justice for the crimes against their own people, against the people of Ukraine, and against the world, against us here in Europe. And one of the crimes is really deliberate attacks on infrastructure, and in particular energy infrastructure. And we mentioned this earlier on, that here in London it's quite warm today, but in Kiev tonight it will be below freezing. And if you don't have heating, that is very dangerous for you and your family. And Putin knows that, which is why he's taking out energy infrastructure. And so there is a great mobilization to bring heating to the homes of Ukrainian people. And one person who is leading on that and very involved with that effort is with us today, and it's about, I'm delighted to introduce Katya Pavlova from Ukraine to Power, who will be speaking to us directly from Kyiv. Over to you, Katya.
Thank you very much. Thank you also to the organizers for keeping an eye on Ukraine, even though I understand that it's challenging to still be involved with Ukrainian matters, even when you have the attacks against your digital space in your countries too. And also not just that. So in general, you also have your own problems, but you keep an eye on us, and that helps to continue with the support of friends. Yeah, I'm lucky to still have electricity. It will finish at 7 p.m. I still have 12 minutes to go. And after that, on my district, there will be no electricity. And this is how, like, the conditions look these days, because Russia has been hitting the critical infrastructure of Ukraine, and it has been successful with that. Yeah, we do have problems with the energy supply now. Let me start with one political message first. Russian war against Ukraine did not start in 2022. It started 12 years ago. And this is important because if we neglect the invader, if we neglect the punishment, if we do not hold the aggressor accountable, it will continue. And it did continue in the case of Ukraine. They were successful in occupying the Crimea. They were successful in occupying a part of the eastern border of Ukraine, which is in the international community more known as Donbass. And then, they just continued preparing themselves, and the Russians re-invaded or started a new wave of invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And just in that moment, the international community reacted better. Still not good enough, so we are still lacking the support of weapon supply to Ukraine, but it was better in 2022 or since 2022 than before that. Well, another thing is kind of good news. I think Russia, well, it's not just my point of view. Russia has not been successful. It has not reached its goals. It did not manage to invade Kyiv in 3 days. It also did not manage to reach its goal that it had for this winter. The goal of Russians was to strike the critical infrastructure of Ukraine, and by that to create chaos and to bring the Ukrainian society away from the Ukrainian authorities. And so that to produce the protests against the Ukrainian authorities and invade Ukraine without the military, because we all see that Russia is not that successful as it expected itself to be on the military area. So they just want to invade Ukraine in another way. This has not happened. The support within the Ukrainian society towards the Ukrainian authorities is still high. We are still speaking about 59 to 61% of Ukrainian society going in favor of the actions of the Ukrainian authorities and the Ukrainian president, including that Ukraine refuses to take in the peace deals that are being offered, peace deals which mean to give up parts of the Ukrainian territory, to decrease the number of Ukrainian army, to make Ukraine kind of a puppet country which would be under control of Russia. Ukraine refuses to take that in, and the Ukrainian society still stands behind its power, behind its president and its authorities in general. So this is good news. There is one more good news, even though I know this is not a day for good news. It's actually a very sad anniversary, but Another good news is that we are speaking about kind of 46% of Ukrainians who are very optimistic about the future of society. What is interesting about it in comparison, so for example, in France, it's about 12% only of people who believe that the future of the society is bright. I don't know where we Ukrainians get that from, but somehow half of us are very optimistic that we are going in some kind of direction that we will survive and that we are keeping strong. Yeah, then what else to tell you about the conditions in Kyiv? Maybe that's interesting. Due to these strikes, we have real problems with the electricity supply. My organization, Ukraine to Power, normally deals with solar panels. So we help Ukrainians to decentralize its electricity, its energy supply system. But now we had to react differently, and we started a humanitarian action where we call it warmth kits to those who have it the hardest in their houses. So in some districts, we have no electricity, we have frozen water systems, and we also have no heating. We have no heating because the heaters, the engines were stroke, and it takes really long time to renovate them. And unfortunately, in at least two bigger districts of Kyiv, the energy supply system is extremely centralized. So this is the effect that we are having now. That's one. Another new wave that is pretty like it struck the media and also the society from within is a row of terrorist attacks against the police in Ukraine. This is a new way that Russia is taking on. Again, since it's not that successful on the front, they have prepared. Okay, like we have not yet proved to the end that it was ordered by the Russian authorities, but it was a row of terrorist attacks, in course of which many police officers were injured or even died. And these attacks were accompanied by the digital attacks too. So whenever the news about the terrorist attacks appeared, there were bots on the internet which kept saying, "Well, who cares? Since it's only police officers who died, then it can just continue like that." So we have also this like information that the attack that wants to bring the Ukrainian society apart. From what I can estimate, this has not been successful either. So Ukrainians do see this as something coming from Russia and are not going to withhold their support for the Ukrainian authorities, for the Ukrainian police, etc. So, yeah, well, if I may give some recommendations, what we can do is we do still need support in delivering weapons to Ukraine. We really need support in winterization. So, yes, this winter is coming to an end. It will become warmer, it will become easier to survive, but another winter will come and it will again be problematic. So we need support from the partners in protecting our critical infrastructure and also decentralizing our energy system. And a recommendation for your societies is that social cohesion is the main weapon that helps Ukraine survive. It was not the international support. It was also not the strongest the army in comparison to some other armies, but this cohesion that brought the whole society deciding and then protecting its country. I think we're still good at that. I wish that your societies were also that cohesive. If they are not, just support that, work on that, and maybe also learn something from Ukraine, how to keep strong together. But like one thing that is not that positive, I'm sorry to finish it with that, because I spoke about good news. So what we see in this current situation is that when people really do not know if they have the ability to heat themselves up, and if they have a warm dish tomorrow on their table, they do donate less to the army. They care more about their just stability and security, and we see a decrease in donations to the Ukrainian army now. That is very unfortunate and means again that we rely on the international support and cannot continue alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Katya, for your testimony from Kiev, Katya Pavlova from the Ukraine to Power. It's so striking your point about reminding us that the Russian invasion started 12 years ago, not 4 years ago, and making that point about the resilience of the Ukrainian people being about solidarity and social cohesion within Ukraine, and the idea of the new Ukrainian society emerging from the old, and the optimism. We're so encouraged to hear about that, the optimism of the Ukrainian people who refuse to see themselves just as victims. They know they have a future, a great future lies ahead of them, and they're optimistic about it, and that is a wonderfully positive message to bring even at this very terrible time. One person who knows about the whole situation before the full-scale invasion 4 years ago, and who was working in Ukraine at that time and is continuing to work in Ukraine today, is my colleague Dr. Wolfgang Reisman from Media Dialogue and Youth for Media, who will be speaking to us from Germany. Wolfgang, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roger. Thank you, Katharina, and naturally Xavier, for making this conference possible. 4 years of full-scale attack to Ukraine. First of all, some personal things. I remember very well, I had been in Ukraine in November 21, shortly before the attack started. Nobody believed, or not nobody, but most of the people didn't believe that it could happen, what happens on the 24th, several months later. I learned two things. I made an interview with the military TV of Ukraine at this time, and I thought they will not attack because I know and I have known that Ukrainian army is a strong army, and that Ukrainian army was able to defend the country under circumstances, let's say it in this way. And the other argument, and this is one thing I learned a lot, was the thing that I supported, and I thought that the idea of connecting Russia and Europe and especially Germany by gas business was a good idea. Because I thought, and this is one of the big mistakes, not only I did, that when there is an interdependence and one can earn money with the other one on the same profit interest, this is a security point. But it was just the other way around. It makes possible that Russia can start this attack to Ukraine, and in my view is that this is a very, very important lesson we all have to learn, that economic trade does not automatically mean the way to peace. And then something else happens from my side. there's a lot of people who are very surprised in Germany, also from government, MPs I know, about the resistance of Ukraine. And I was not so surprised being in the country, watching and helping democratic processes in Ukraine since 2015. I learned a lot of this new Ukraine, the resilience. And this is until now what happens. What happens in the military way, that resilience of Ukrainian army and the resilience of the Ukrainian people is the same. It's the same resilience which make it possible that Russia and Putin Russia, this kleptocratic, meanwhile pre-fascistic or fascistic system, has no chance until now to reach their military and political aims. This is also a thing we have to learn. When there is spirit in a society, when there is spirit for democracy, when there is spirit for freedom, also even a small country has the chance, with the support of the others, to not to win, but to stay in a war and hopefully win it. And this is the message to whole Europe, to all of us. We have to stand for our values, we have to stand for our countries, and we have to stand especially for our Europe. And we also need resilience against autocratic and militaristic efforts in our surrounding, especially from Russia, to defend our freedom. This is what we can learn from Ukraine. And the most necessary things are to keep on supporting Ukraine, to keep on giving and delivering weapons to Ukraine, make them military strong. It's in our own interest to give them political support. Ukraine must become a member of the European Union as soon as possible, and on a way that is really, in a way that Ukraine can really go and European Union can go too. There must be a European perspective for Ukraine, and there must be also security, a security situation for Ukraine to show that the Russian imperialism is over in Ukraine. That does not mean that Russia will be an enemy forever, but this is one of the key points to make peace on the whole continent. Means, for me, I learned a lot from Ukraine. We have been there in November last year again, when Kiev was under fire, for example, and I saw with my own eyes how people are fighting. I had been in Bucha and in Irpin. We made a film about mass graves with the students of the University of Kiev, the Institute of Journalism, and we know what was going on, we know what is going on, and we know how important it is for whole Europe, for all of us, to support Ukraine and to support the spirit of Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang, for that passionate and contribution based on many, many years of experience and sharing with us the lessons that you've learned, in particular that, contrary to what you previously believed, economic trade is not necessarily the road to peace. In fact, in relation to Russia and Putin, that was exactly the opposite happened, exactly the reverse. And it's incumbent on us, as you've said, to make sure that Ukraine has now and in the future the military hardware, the missiles, whether it's the Taurus missiles from Germany, whatever it is that it's going to need in order to be able to defend itself against Putin's aggression. And as I mentioned earlier, the threat is not just to Ukraine, it's to the whole of Europe. And there have been occasions where Russian jets already have overflown the Baltic states. And we're going to hear now from Egli Celestian from the Lithuanian College of Democracy and from the board of New European People's Forum about her perspective on this. Egli, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Hello, could you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity to be here. From us, from Lithuania, from the first day, this war is very important. It is not Ukrainian war. It war against freedom. So the freedom is our essential value. And what we're doing today, every day, all these 4 years, every day in Lithuania, we do support Ukrainians. And in Lithuania society, you could see it in everyday lives. On a bus, you will see Ukrainian flag. Everywhere you will see many Ukrainians flag pictures. So for all our society, it is so important because being as a small country like Lithuania became independent in 1991, we have very similar feelings. Every day we met very similar treats. So this is why it's so important to be here, to be in a line with Ukrainians. And I would like to repeat that it's not a war between countries. It's the issue, it's our freedom, we're fighting for all our freedom.
Egli, thank you so much. I think we may have lost the connection, Jabir. Have we lost the connection?
No, she seems.
I think I'm not sure we have the video connection. We seem to have lost the audio connection, but even for that brief time, it was so good to have Egli with us, and we may hear from Egli again later on at today's event. But I think for now, I would say that concludes our first panel. Perhaps Jabir,
Excuse me, Roger.
Yes.
Yes. Well, we have Professor Olivier Vedrin with us.
Excellent. I'm delighted. I had notification that he wasn't able to join us. That's very good news. Olivier Vedrin is Dr. Olivier Vedrin is a representative from on the board of the Jean Monnet Association, one of our partner organizations in the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine, and has spent many years. He also lived in Kiev for many years, supporting Ukraine, and delighted that Olivier can join us for this event. Olivier, we have a few minutes and then we need to go to the second panel. Delighted that you could make it. We look forward to your contribution. Olivier.
Looks like Olivier is not in the conference anymore.
Okay. In that case, perhaps we can see if we can reconnect with him and bring him back into a later session. I'm just a little bit conscious of the time and of keeping to time. And so if I may, Jabir, I would like to conclude our first panel and hand back to you for our second panel, the second of the three panels at today's event, 4 years of aggression, Ukraine's resistance and the world's responsibility. Back to you, Jabir.
Thank you very much indeed, Roger. It was a really sobering section in which we heard testimonies and opinions and analysis that are without any hesitation and without any euphemisms or diplomatic gloves. It clearly depicted the reality of the war, the reality of the weaponized winter in which Ukrainians find themselves. But now I invite you to speak, to join us in the section in which we will speak about the, let's say, invisible war, the war of propaganda narratives, of disinformation, and of hybrid operations that are directed against Europe. And it is a very important point that actually Wolfgang made just minutes ago when he said, more precisely also Wolfgang, but also Katja even more directly, she said that we should not forget that we are in a war for 12 years. And that war, Ukraine is not bearing itself alone, but it is a war that corresponds with the hybrid operations of Moscow against the European democracies, against democracies in Europe, but also beyond. And that is why I think that it is very important to hear the voices that are in this section, and those are Lina Kush, who is the first secretary of the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine, then Lesia Horodenko, she's a professor at Taras Shevchenko National University in Kyiv, Ukraine, but also currently a researcher with the University of Mannheim in Germany. And also she's a colleague of the Media Dialogue people who are running the Media Dialogue project led by Dr. Wolfgang Ressmann. And after Professor Horodenko, we will hear from Mika Boyster, a journalistic veteran, and he's the head of the biggest, I believe, the biggest German journalistic organization, the German Union of Journalists. And there we will, in this panel, we will speak about the invisible war. And first I will give the floor to Lina Kush, who is coming from the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine, and she's at the moment in Ukraine. Let's hear this Ukrainian voice, one more Ukrainian voice about the invisible war this time. Can we hear?
Good afternoon. Yeah,
Good
I
afternoon.
can. Good afternoon, dear friends. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is my big honor to be among you this day. We are gathered today in the fourth year of full-scale invasion, but as Jabir and as Dr. Ressmann have said, for many of us, and for me personally, the war began 12 years ago in my hometown of Donetsk, eastern Ukraine. When Russian-inspired troops, they seized administrative buildings, attacked Ukrainian activists and Ukrainian journalists, and held a so-called referendum. All this was accompanied by slogans about protecting the Russian-speaking people, Russian-speaking population from so-called Ukrainian Nazis. I remember how absurd it sounded to me. After all, the majority of the population in my region spoke Russian. Most newspapers, websites, TV broadcasters, or advertisements were in Russian. All signs were in Russians, and Russians was taught in the school. Why did we need to be protected? It was I couldn't understand that if the Russian language was not under the threat. But the powerful machine of Russia propaganda started to brainwash the population and prepared them to the arrival of Russian tanks. Then there was MH17, the crash of the Amsterdam Kuala Lumpur airplane. It was near my hometown. And in this crash, almost 300 people died. It happened not far from Donetsk, as I said, but as Ukrainian journalists, we couldn't work legally at those time. And but foreign media and foreign journalists managed to reach the spot, managed to reach the crash site, and show all over the world the scale of the tragedy. And these images and these videos became the evidences of Russian crimes. And it showed how Russian-inspired troops, they use Russian weapons at civilian warcraft. I remember very well how Russia tried to deny its involvement, multiplying versions, each more absurd than the last, blurring the boundaries of reality, just to avoid responsibility for this crime. It later used these methods to deny the crimes committed by Russian troops in Bucha and other cities. The same modus operandi. Therefore, from my own experience, I know the invisible war is often more patient than the visible one. And this is not only a Ukrainian story. Also a couple of important things from our field experience during these 4 years of full-scale invasion. A fake is a lie meant to deserve. Propaganda is a long-term strategy meant to reshape perception. And propaganda is repeated until it becomes background noise. Its effectiveness depends on regularity. Propaganda doesn't not target one video or one post, it targets emotions, identities, historical interpretation. Let me turn to something very concrete. How Ukrainian journalists are working now at front lines and in frontline regions. The National Union of Journalists of Ukraine, last year we had a project strengthening the resilience of frontline media as a tool to combat disinformation. This project was supported by the Embassy of Lithuania in Ukraine, and we believe it was highly necessary, highly important for our media and for our users, because local media in frontline regions face shelling, destroyed newsrooms, forced relocation, power outages, cyber attacks, and severe staff shortages at the same time. They continue to work. My colleague Olga Makucha from newspaper Vist in Chernihiv, she said, for us, it's essential to publish eyewitness testimonies. They destroy enemy narratives and show the truth that Russia deliberately targets civilians. And another journalist, Tatiana Lohvina from Kharkiv region, from frontline district, she emphasized that even highly media literate audiences are overwhelmed by the scale of information flows and can mistake fakes for reality. Because of that, verification during time, digital techniques, photo and video authentication, and preventing accidental amplification of this disinformation are highly important skills for journalists now. Last year in November, our team also presented the analytical report about information needs of residents of frontline territories of Ukraine. And 400 respondents from frontline and liberated communities in 8 regions, they said that maybe almost 80% of respondents are primarily concerned about security information and about the safety around them, around their community, and say there is not enough of it. So because of that, people need this information. They seek local news and they seek explanation and interpretation of, for example, legal changes. Tatiana Lovina, I have said about this journalist from Kharkiv region. She said that their fact-checking is reaching a new level. She said journalists at the border are the first to encounter distorted information. Therefore, you often have to deny something, explain it to readers. When you have the tools, it helps a lot. The other colleague, Olena Kasatkina, at newsrooms are the first to react to events in communities, and people in these communities are more likely to trust local media. I see Mika Boyster, our friend, and heard of German Union of Journalists here, and we appreciate for support of this union to our small local and hyper local newspapers. Because it was not only support of newspapers, it was a strong act of solidarity and strong act of fighting this Russia propaganda on frontline, close to frontline in Ukraine. Totally propaganda is no longer limited to TV channels, and we see increasingly encounter AI generated pieces, false information, false pictures, false videos, and so on. So journalists must show complexity and avoid hate speech and explain manipulation mechanism to audiences. People believe fakes because they appeal to emotions and often an illusion of control, especially in times of war or under the stress. That's why debunking is not enough. We must also teach how disinformation works. From the Ukrainian experience, we clearly see that Russia spends billions of dollars annually on propaganda. This is state-funded information warfare. We understand that we can't use methods, for example, North Korea method against Russia propaganda. The only way to resist this weapon, this information weapon, is through facts, through critical thinking, through quality journalism and quality and professional journalism. I appreciate your support, and I appreciate that you conducted such event in this day. Journalists are important. Thank you.
We appreciate your work, Lina, it is immensely difficult to be a journalist in Ukraine all these years, not only in the 4 years of the full-scale invasion, of course, it's extremely difficult, but also in the 8 years of the partial occupation and invasion of Russia against Ukraine, when the war was even more invisible. Well, it looks like the war wasn't that invisible in the end, because the journalists were here to give the reality a chance, but not many were willing to look into the eyes of reality. And of course, you inspired me. I got restless at a certain point when you spoke about the conditions in which journalists are working in Ukraine. And I remember all those victims, probably more than 100 journalists, your organization has the precise number, are captive. They're captured by the Russian occupation forces. Some of them were brutally killed, like the recent example we had with Victoria Roshchina. And we also remember many other journalists who are now in Russian prisons and captivity that we don't know of. One of them is Vilen Temeryanov, a journalist from Crimea who was captured by the Russian occupation forces. He was submitted to psychiatric torture that comes from punitive psychiatry, that comes from the playbook of the Soviet, the most brutal Soviet times. And he is now probably somewhere in prison in Rostov-on-Don, and I take this opportunity to once again, after many times over, I demand his immediate release, because he didn't do anything else apart of reporting on what is going on in his town. With this long end note and introduction note to another Ukrainian voice who is now calling from Germany, Professor Lesia Horodenko, I'd like to start with a question: how are all these narratives being developed, and what is the impact of these narratives of the Russian propaganda machinery in of course, in their country as well, but in Europe as well, in Germany, because you as a scientist are also following these issues and investigating the impact of the propaganda and the narratives in this thematic section on the invisible war. The floor is yours, Professor Horodenko. Lesia, if you hear me.
Yes. Good evening, dear colleagues. For many of us, this topic is not abstract. It is not something we study only through data, theories, or the media reports. It is something that has entered our lives directly. In Germany, we can see a different position. Some people is really fighting for Ukraine. So, for example, Mr. Resman, he is one of the biggest Ukrainian patriot, but also we have some position when people have sometimes different position because they say we don't know what is it really. The war is
far from us, and we don't know what is truth, what is a lie, and we have a different position. As it normal for a democratic society, when people can say what they mean, what they think, but for Ukrainian, we want one position. We want a strong position from our partners, from European countries, from all world. Russia is aggressor. Russia now have big war against Ukraine, and my country has been living under full scale invasions for years. Today we have fourth university, fourth day, full escape, but this war is more and more than 4 years only. Every day we brings news about drone strike, about destruction city, about destruction infrastructure. So, for example, Katerina now without electricity in Kiev, she can't be with us in this conference. We have gross cultural heritage, but beyond the psychological violence, there is also a persistent attempt to erase Ukrainian identity, language, and history. This reality shapes how we understand security, violence, and information. It reminds us that wars are not only with weapons, but also with narratives, with words that justify, distort, or normalize aggression. Today, I would like to shift our focus from terrorism as a psychological act of violence to terrorism as a strategic narrative instrument in contemporary information warfare. In the context of the Russian-Ukrainian war, terrorism is not only something that happens on the battlefield. It is also something that is constructed, framed, interrupted, and communicated. The label terrorism function as a powerful political weapon, one that shapes legitimacy, mobilizes societies, and influence international response. In other words, the struggle is not only over territory, it is also over who has authority to define violence. One of the central functions of terror discourse is delegitimization. Labeling the adversary as terrorist places them outside the country of legitimate political actors and portrays them as a criminal and irrational. In Ukrainian media discourse, the term is typically used in connection with attack on civilians and infrastructure. For example, headlines often read, Russia launches massive terrorist strike on residential areas, or the Russia drone attack described as state terrorism. In Russian state-aligned media, however, the same label is applied to Ukraine actions. Ukrainian terrorist attack border region, sabotage group eliminated in counter-terror operation, Kiev regime carries out terrorist attack on civilians. Once an opponent is framed as terrorist, extraordinary measures became justified. In Russian narratives, military actions are frequently present as a relation or prevention. Russian forces strike terrorist infrastructure in response to attack. Retaliatory operation targets decision-making centers. Security force neutralize terrorist treating civilians. This framing transforms offensive action into defensive necessary. The discourse shifts from legality to urgency and survival. The label terrorism, therefore, functions as a moral amplifier, making escalation appear both inevitable and legitimate. Terror framing also plays a powerful role in mobilizing domestic population. Emotionally charged reporting intensifies fear, anger, and solidarity, helping governments consolidate public support and marginalize distances. Typically, Ukrainian headlines emphasizing victimhood and resilience. National victims of Russian terror, cities under attack, Ukrainian stands united against terror. By the way, Russian narratives, by contrast, stress treatment and defense. Residents demand protection after terrorist shelling, citizens really in support of anti-terror measures, and so on. In both contexts, emotional response often outweighs factual nuance. Externally, terrorism discourse aims to shape how international audience interpret the conflict. Russian messaging often seek to portray the war as a complex or mutually violent. Escalation continues as both sides exchange attack, conflict intensifies amid mutual actual of terrorism, and so on. Such framing contributes to what scholars call both sides. The perception that responsibility is eventually distributed. Importantly, these communication patterns are not spontaneous reaction. They are integrated into broader hybrid warfare strategies. Coordinated messaging across television, online media, traditional media, social networks, different emotional interpretation while minimization contextual analysis. The goal is not necessarily to convince everyone of a single narrative. Rather, it is to produce confusion, facts, and uncertainty. Why this matters for democracy? The most dangerous long-term effect is normalization. When terror discourse saturates the information environment, violence becomes routine, outrage diminishes, and public attention shifts from responsibility to exhaustion. In this context, calls the neutrality of disengagement may reinforce aggressive strategies. Open societies are particularly vulnerable because their pluralistic media environments can be exploited by strategic disinformation. In contemporary conflicts, terrorism apparatus simulates into domains as psychical violence and as a communicative construct. Understanding this dual nature is essential for analyzing modern warfare and protecting democratic society. Ultimately, the key question is not only who commits violence, but who controls the meaning of violence. Such messages are not neutral descriptions, but strategic communication tool aimed at distorting reality, delegitimization of Ukraine, and shaping global public opinion. If accepted uncritically, they risk fostering false equivalence, undermining support for a victim of aggression, and normalizing disinformation as a fact. Only sustained critical think, media literature, and careful evaluation of source can prevent the information of biased personals and protect Ukraine from prejudiced narrative in the international arena. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. And well, of course, open societies are vulnerable, and propaganda, war propaganda of Russia, but as well the authoritarian, populist, far right, far left, radical structures actually use democracy against democracy. And that leads me to our next participant, and that's Mr. Mika Boyster, the head of the German Union of Journalists. And I actually want to, Mika, hello, do we still have you? This
of course,
actually,
yes.
Yes, great. That actually leads me to two questions, but two in one actually. And one is rather generic, but very important when we speak about you and your experience and how difficult it is to get through the fog of propaganda in Germany, in Western Europe, but in Germany in this case. How difficult it is to be a journalist from day to day to try to bring the facts and the truth to the audience. And in that sense, we heard very recently, we heard from you in December 24, but then recently some developments about a great news that Europe might happen to have its own independent European social media network. And how will that help you as a journalist, to all of us journalists, and how will it help Ukraine and Europe to preserve its democracy against the propaganda, against the invisible war, against the invisible or not so visible or deniable operations against democracy and democratic values? So it turned out to be a little bit of a commentary as well, but you get the point, I guess. Thank you for being with us, Mika.
Well, it's great to be here amongst friends, and I send all my solidarity and greetings to Alina, to all colleagues in Ukraine who are working under incredible, difficult circumstances. There's no heating, no electricity, all these atrocities that you have to endure. And I'm in awe what I see, that there's newspapers every day delivered in the front lines, in frontline towns and cities. There's excellent programming, excellent reporting, although circumstances are so difficult. So it's unbelievable what these journalists do every day. And thank you at NUYU for supporting the colleagues in any way you can, for reaching out to your friends in Europe and worldwide to gather support. And it's just amazing to see what good you can do when people work together, and that's just great. Your question, Javier, how difficult is it to say what's right and wrong, what's fact and what's fiction? I think it's always been difficult. If it weren't, we wouldn't need journalists and experts to do it. But I have the feeling that's becoming increasingly more difficult with the emergence of artificial intelligence, deepfakes, and so on. It's becoming, everybody's seen all those pictures that have been generated by AI. We all remember the Pope in the white jacket, snow jacket, and that looked, on the first glance, it looked real, but then you've seen that everybody realized that's a fake, obviously. And we've come such a far way since then. It's exponential growth in the AI sector. It's becoming generative AI, especially, is becoming increasingly better in the products it creates. And pictures, especially AI-generated pictures that are used in political communications, are not. It's not possible to recognize if it's real, if it's documenting the truth, or if it's a fake on the first glance. You need more and more runs of verifying it, and you need experts to do it. And that's the problem. Oliver Swift was the first to describe it, I think, that back then in the days, that a lie travels 10 times faster than the truth. And that was back then, when he's written his books, and I think in the Victorian age. Now we have a worldwide net. Now we have artificial intelligence, and it's so much easier to spread lies day in and day out. And there's only so many of us who try to figure out what's the truth. That's not so much a hidden war. It's an open war. It's a war on truth. It's a war on the fundamentals of our democratic, open, liberal societies, and we need to navigate through the lies, and that's the job. That's what we journalists do. But we face another problem. It's not only the technicality of finding out what's true or not. It's how do we fund it, and how do we reach an audience? And those two pillars are also under fire in their system that we work in. On the finance side, journalism needs to be funded. How do we fund it? We have public broadcasting, which is under siege by populist movements in Europe, in the world. And if we have private enterprises, we have those platform industries in the Silicon Valley that are basically Google, Meta, Alphabet, or black holes sucking on all the advertising revenue that traditional media houses once used to finance their enterprises. And while we're losing income, we're also losing our audiences, because it's not paper, it's not television, it's not radio on the analog distribution anymore. We need a digital gateway to reach audiences, but we have a monopoly, and the monopoly is Facebook, is Instagram, is TikTok. And if you look where these companies are headquartered and who controls them, it's the Communist Party in China. It's with TikTok, one of the most influential social networks, especially for our youth, the next generation trying to figure out how to work in our societies. And then we have billionaires in the Silicon Valley controlling the social networks that are most relevant here, with strong ties to a presidency that's best described as irrational, maybe rational, we don't know, but we have no influence whatsoever. So digital sovereignty has to be one of the major objectives. If we're talking about a war on information, a war on truth, we need to face the fact that our liberty, our freedoms, our democracy is not only defended on the battlefield with tanks and rockets and soldiers, but it's also defended if we have the right infrastructure. We need digital sovereignty. We need the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, to support our societies without any support or interference from the United States or Beijing or Russia, for that matter. And while we are talking here about the war in Ukraine that's fought by Russia, we must not forget that, I don't remember who said it, Russia is only the flood, China is the climate change. And if you look on disinformation worldwide, it's Beijing that's leading in every metric, especially in Africa, especially in Southern America, where we see that the interest of the American president seems to lie. That's all Beijing influence there. So we're talking about Ukraine today, rightfully so. But in the next couple of years, our focus needs to shift to what's happening in China and how do we Europeans act in that way. So we need to protect journalism. We need to protect our way. So we need digital resilience. We need digital infrastructure, digital sovereignty. And this needs to be one of the prime aspects of political acting in Europe.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for this really fresh, new information. Of course, who would be able to bring new information, if not a journalist of your caliber. Thank you very much for that, Mika. And thank you also to Lesia and to Lina, who provided each from their own perspective extremely valuable information and thoughts and analysis. I especially value the work of Lina with the Union of Journalists in Ukraine, but I also would like to share with the audience that I've got a very interesting presentation from Professor Horodenko, which will be, with her kind permission, provided to our audiences on our media platform very soon after this conference. I'd like to invite Roger back to the steering wheel, the moderation, to help me finalize these minutes, these talks and exchanges in the third panel. The third panel, or the third thematic section, is the choice. What must be defended and by whom? And I would like to propose to invite Mr. Emanuele Richiello, the director of the Centro Studi Internazionali, which is part of the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine. If you don't mind, Roger, unless you want to add something, but Emanuele is short of time, and I'd like to give him the floor, if you don't mind.
Very good idea. Welcome to Emanuele, and thank you for your support with the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine through your organization, Centro Studi Internazionali. Thank you for the excellent conference that you organized last October in Rome at the European Parliament offices, and for being with us today. Emanuele, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope you hear me well.
Yes, yes, yes. Please go on.
Okay, I'm very sorry about me being in a rush. It's always like this, but I'll try to contribute to this discussion for what I can. And first of all, thank you very much, Javier, for organizing this. Thank you very much, Roger. Thank you to the Defending Democracy Global Initiative and Civil, the Center for Freedom, for convening us on these very relevant topics. I really wanted to, after a discussion with Xavier, I really wanted to kind of like touch upon this last section, which I think is the most relevant for my kind of work. So I really want to begin with the facts. I'll try to keep it within 5, maximum 6 minutes, no more than that. I want to just begin with the facts, because this section of our conference is entitled Choices, and choices must be grounded, I believe, in evidence. So as of January 2026, the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine has documented more than 15,000 civilian killed, and over 14,100 injured since February 2022. The year 2025 was the deadliest for Ukrainian civilians specifically, since the full-scale invasion began. A 31% increase in civilian casualties compared to 2024, and 70% higher than 2023. This is not just a collateral damage, I believe. This is a systematic weaponization of winter itself. Meanwhile, I think the human cost extends beyond the battlefield. Nearly 6.9 million Ukrainians refugees remain displaced across the world. Total military casualties on both sides may approach 2 million by spring of this year, for some forecasts analysis. And with Russia sustaining the largest number of troop fatalities of any major power in any conflict since Second World War. And I think this says a lot. These are not abstract statistics. They are empirical facts upon which our choices must rest, and we have to develop them. So let me turn in a way to the core question, and I really want to focus on this in these last 3-4 minutes. What must be defended? You know, like these conferences we organized throughout this year have always been about what should we defend. I think like previous interventions made it very clear in that sense. And I think I want to summarize it by ending maybe a couple of issues. So first and foremost, I think we need to defend the prohibition on wars of aggression in European territories, first and foremost, but anywhere. As the joint statement of the presidents of the European Council, the European Commission, and the European Parliament affirmed today, no country can annex its neighbor, no country. Borders cannot be changed by force. The aggressor cannot be rewarded. If we allow this principle to erode through fatigue, through ambiguity, through what, even within the EU, through what our colleagues in Section 2 rightly called through propaganda, we see public having both sidism in a way, then we have not merely failed in Ukraine, we have failed in Europe, we have failed in the West, and we have failed as international community based on a rule-based order. Second, I think, and this leads me to my second point, because the second point is the integrity of international humanitarian law. We cannot lose that. Ukraine is not just a war, it represents a symbolic event in history through which global dynamics and great power dynamics and power relations are being shaped. And also the international law-based world order is being shaped, and within which the international humanitarian law. I believe that as Europeans, first and foremost, especially in this changing scenario in the West, we need to defend the integrity of international humanitarian law. Third, I think the democratic character of European and transatlantic institutions. I said this already in the previous conference, if you remember, Jabir. But I think what is at stake here is really the democratic liberal international order, which some have thought for too long it was just a US-led liberal order. Now we are understanding that it's not just about the US-led order. It's about all the countries being within it, believing in the fundamental liberal values and the fundamental democratic values of this order. And as of now, Europe, with Ukraine and against Russia, is defending this order and its democratic character of European institutions, both nationally and internationally. A society under bombardment, I think, has continued to hold its institutions accountable, to debate policy openly. We did it in Rome, quite openly, with MPs, ministers, civil society, and so on. We will continue to do so. And I think that is precisely what authoritarian actors do not do. This is what we have on top of them. This is what we have more of them compared to them. And this is where we can demonstrate that we are better. This is where we can demonstrate that being within this democratic liberal international order is worth it. And this is really about those who want to be in this democratic liberal order and those who don't. And Russia doesn't. We do. This is what we are defending. I think it's important that, and I'm going to conclude on this note last minute, that governments bear the primary responsibility of the action in defending these three elements through whatever coordination that is thought, be it the coalition of the willing, we've discussed it in our events, be it in the European Union itself, be it through other international kind of agreements, even, for example, with non-European continental states, such as I think of Canada. Think of what the Prime Minister of Canada said at the World Economic Forum, for example. I think it's a strong message that shows propensity to collaborate in defending these 3 points. But as we rightly do here, and we've done throughout our events, civil society and media must carry an irreplaceable responsibility to inform the people, to inform about what is happening, to fight against misinformation, to fight against the cyber war that Russia is not only conducting on the field, but also through digital platforms, social media, and so on. And this is of utmost importance to understand what is really happening. This is just not, and of course it is about Ukraine, but it's not just Ukraine. It is first and foremost about Ukraine and Ukrainian people, but this is about Europe, and it's about our system as a whole. In this way, I believe citizens too can bear responsibility and know in a better way, more responsibly, how to deliver informations, and first and foremost, who to elect as representatives in our European countries. Ukraine, I believe, and I'll end here, is a mirror of a world that is changing, of the global dynamics that are changing. And we really need to discuss and think about it carefully. We cannot ignore any day that is ongoing is something that it might be an existential threat to us, and we must be very careful. As President Zelensky said, standing among the flags and portraits of fallen soldiers in Kiev Central Square, that Ukraine has defended its independence and has not lost its statehood. That is a statement of extraordinary resilience. And I think that resilience should also apply to our system by showing support to Ukraine, by fighting war both on the ground and digitally, virtually, against propaganda and against cyber attacks that we've been receiving. Now, 4 years ago, many assumed that Ukraine will fall within weeks because Russia was a great power and that the Europeans, because of lack of foreign policy and defense policy coordination, could not face that challenges. It did not. The question now is not whether Ukraine can endure. It has demonstrated that it can, and it can resist for long, and Europeans can support it. The question is whether the rest of us, Europeans, will make the choices that endurance deserves: sustained military support, robust accountability mechanisms, the rejection of impunity, and the political courage to integrate further in the foreign and defense arena, both within the European Union and outside, also including historical partners that are not part of the European Union or are not part anymore of the European Union. Think of the UK. If we do it in that way, Russia cannot win against us. And the Finnish president made it very clear. They cannot win it against us. And we have to stand together for making that happen. The choice, dear colleagues, is ours. And history, as always, it's in our hands. So it's about what we want to choose to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, very much indeed, Emanuele. What you just said was almost like hearing an echo from our declaration. So everybody who heard Emanuele and agreed with what he said, actually he partly has derived his thoughts from his experience, but also corresponds with what we have in the declaration. Of course, that's pretty natural because we go a long way back with Emanuele's organization. The very important event in Rome on 2nd of October was actually carrying these ideas and thoughts as well. Thank you very much for this sharp and fact-based analysis, and stay in touch. And of course, we're speaking about Europe a lot. And if you allow me, Roger, or maybe you could introduce our next speaker, Heather.
I'd be delighted, Shabir, to
Yes,
introduce
please.
Robertson from the University of Virginia, who knows North Macedonia very well, and the work of Civil Organization, are their partners in defending democracy global, but also Europe, and it's incredibly valuable for Europe as a whole, and it's a democracy expert and human rights expert, and we're really very fortunate to have Heather's perspective from the United States this evening. And so without further ado, we welcome Heather, who, by the way, is also a co-author of our book, the book that came out of the conference we held in Skopje at the end of 2014, Defending Democracy and Human Rights. And I know is working closely with us on the follow-up edition. Heather, thank you for being such a fantastic democracy and human rights defender, and for sharing with us your perspective on this from the United States. Heather.
Okay, everyone. Roger, thank you. That was the absolute perfect, oh, I blurred my background, excuse me. That was the perfect segue to me showing the book, which, but you just did it, so that's great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for pulling this together, Roger and Dr. Ressman, Dr. Wolfgang Ressman, and of course Jabir, and everyone with the Defending Democracy Global Initiative. It's so good to see everyone and to see your resolve and to just be, to just feel it, to really feel it, even from America. I do want to take stock of some of our accomplishments and their impacts, because I believe that fatalism is the enemy. I know we can make a change, and we are. And as Emanuele said, and as so many of you have said, we are making that change. Ukrainians are making the biggest change, or Russia would have won the war long ago, as was expected by many, including Russia. So I do want to draw attention to the book. I think many of us, I know many of us were there for the conference that this book grew out of. Over a year ago, it was in December of 2024, so many of us coming together from Macedonia, Serbia, Kosovo, Bosnia, I know I'll miss somebody, Lithuania, Belarus, Germany, and of course, Ukraine. And when I tell people about this conference and that we all were together in a room together, that it was translated into 3 languages, people were interacting over a period of days, building solidarity and discussing solutions. They're just so impressed, and they want to be a part of it, and they think that this is incredibly hopeful, and I know how hopeful it was as well, and how much these networks are needed so badly. There's the social cohesion that Katya referred to that we all need to build locally, but there's this international social cohesion that I know we are rebuilding and building anew. So as Roger just indicated, I do think it's time to update, it's time for another book. We have this fantastic declaration, which I've been reading during, I started last night and then read again whenever we were having some technical difficulties. And it really is incredible. And we should all be signing on and bringing in new people because it, I don't know. I'm always the optimistic one, and I know that it's incredibly out of place, but we have to do it. There's no alternative. There's no universe in which things get better and Ukraine prevails without all of us pulling together. And thank you again, everyone, for having me here and letting me just listen to everything that you're doing. Oh, and I do think, Roger, that this book, and Javier and Wolfgang, that this book, it should do something to kind of follow us home. We have what we do in the conference, but then when I look at everything that you have all done over the last year, Roger is going to, place after place after place to speak to parliamentarians. Wolfgang, every day it seems that Wolfgang is doing something new to engage with, Ukraine, Belarus, and just, it's incredible the work that everyone is doing. So it's not just what we do at the conference, it's what we do when we leave and fan out. So thank you again for having me. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Heather. You do so much for us as well as democracy generally. I know we're very, very short of time, but I wonder if you would take a question or two and just respond off the hoof, because how is the commitment, which you say in the United States, towards continuing to support Ukraine? How much is it a feature of the political debate in the United States? And do you think there might be a shift in relation to this issue after the midterm elections, or is it something that is really somehow peripheral to the core debates in the United States at the moment?
I do think it's unfortunately too peripheral. It is very much. I was thinking when you asked early in the conference, what were we doing when Russia attacked in 2022, and I thought, well, I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but I remember I was shocked, even though I had been warned again and again by my colleagues in North Macedonia, especially Javier. And I do think that there is still denial in the American public, and especially, and this is very unfortunately, on the American left, which is what that's what I associate with typically, is people who, believe in like a robust social safety net and free medical care and things like that. That group tends to like coalesce with people who, many are on the side of Ukraine, absolutely. But there are also people that when they heard that Russia might attack, they thought, oh, this is a red scare, So there is still that. I can't believe it, but it is still part of the debate. And even just recently, I was having a conversation with a very intelligent friend who informed me that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is like a family, like an interfamily conflict, and really we have to let them sort it out. And obviously I set her straight to the best of my ability, but that is unfortunately a part of kind of the, I don't know, like the political thinking. But I do think that there's enormous hope in that we, if you're reading the polls, as I do all the time, people are not a fan of the administration that we have right now. There is, this is one of the reasons I want to fight fatalism. I have friends who are leaving the US because they think that we can't win. Meanwhile, I'm reading the polls and I'm watching politicians, Republican politicians, abandon the position that is so brutal and pro Russia. So I'll stop. But I guess what I'm saying is the people that are actually in government, the people that will step into the position of experts once our current regime is defeated, or even just at the midterms, as you say, I think that those people do know what they're doing, and we do have very good experts who just will be much better informed than your average American who just, it's an isolated country. I hate to say it. I don't know if that helps, Roger. And I
That's
feel
really helpful.
a lot
Thank
longer
you.
than I should have.
No, it's really helpful. And perhaps just a very short follow-up question, because you're responding to my question about American support for Ukraine, but what about American support for Europe as a whole? And do people see the connection? In other words, that if Ukraine falls, Europe is in peril. Do they make that connection? And do they see it, as you said, more as a sort of family affair between Russia and Ukraine? How much is there an awareness of the threat to the whole of Europe in the United States, and how much do Americans really care about the fate of Europe?
Well, I mean, this is, they don't care enough. And this is the crazy thing to me, is that they want to leave the US to go to Europe because they think they can escape from the authoritarian, the rising authoritarianism we have in this country, and that somehow Europe will that Europe is safe. And these are people who have resources because they can leave. So they have money, they have influence, they know how to get passports, they know how to get visas, they know how to do all of this stuff. They're so valuable to the fight for democracy and to protect Ukraine, to make it so that Ukraine can win. They're so valuable. I feel like I'm saying such horrible things about my countrymen, but there is often a real disconnect there, that they don't necessarily understand. Oh, if I leave this place, then Ukraine will have less support. Then Europe will not be safe. Like, they just don't make that connection, and I'm really sorry to say that. I'm sure there are people who do.
Okay. Thank you very much, Heather. Thank you. Back to you, Shabir.
Thank you. Just a very quick note. I want to refer on the mention of our exchanges back in 2022 with Heather. It wasn't very difficult to see what is going on, because we, in the Western Balkans, particularly North Macedonia, we looked into Ukraine very carefully, and at many occasions with admiration, especially with the Revolution of Dignity, or the Maidan revolution. And after the little green men, as BBC called them, showed up in Crimea, we knew that this will escalate, especially because the West was not quite keen to see the reality behind what was justified as just a defensive operation of the Russian invader. I won't go there in extension. I just wanted to say that it was obvious. We knew what will happen. We're just 1,000 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border, and actually we know the Russians for decades in the past, as well as the time when it was the Soviet Union. That's why we knew better, I believe. We could sense it in the air. Back to you, Roger.
Jabir, I think the time has come to bring today's proceedings to a close. Thank you once again to you and your team for putting together this very important event to commemorate, or not to commemorate, to mark the occasion of the 4 years since the Russian invasion full-scale invasion of Ukraine, because as Katya reminded us, the first invasion was 12 years ago, and this has been going on for a long time. And we have these conferences and reunions, and we stand with Ukraine today as we have done in the past, and we will do in the future. And it has been a very sobering conference, as Emanuele has reminded us in this final session. If we look through the lens of Ukraine at the liberal democratic order, it does not look in good shape, and that is the perspective of a European. But we've also heard from Heather, who shares that perspective, that her fellow countrymen and countrywomen are perhaps not seeing that, or perhaps as committed and as invested in that as really is necessary. And we do at this time need to hold people to account. Obviously Putin and the Russian regime need to be held to account, as we heard, but we also need to reflect on our own responsibility for what happens next and be clear about what is at stake. So I think at this point, I will invite our colleague Wolfgang Reisman, the third of the trio, the three organizations that make up Defending Democracy Global Initiative, New European People's Forum, and Civil and Center for Freedom and Media Dialogue, Youth for Media. And so, Wolfgang, over to you, please, to make the closing remarks and the vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roger, for your words. Thank you, Xavier, and all the panelists we have had today. I think we discussed a lot of different parts from different views over the Atlantic, in between Ukraine, about Europe. It's all connected. But one thing we should never forget: every day civilians are dying, soldiers are dying. And so this war must come to an end as soon as possible, and under conditions we discussed, under democratic conditions. And I think one of the most important points, and this is my last idea, is that altogether in supporting Ukraine is the key to solve the problems of this war and to stop the killing. And one positive thing is Ukraine is still fighting, Ukraine is still resilient. And another, I think, also very important point, we are all together and we are resilient. I don't know whether we would have come together without this Russian try to bring democracy under pressure. And so one of the results for us that we can support Ukraine, and we support Ukraine by our unity and by our great team, which was built in the last year, really with a lot of power. We got the book. We are in Ukraine partly. We have lot of other activities all around Europe and all over the world, let's say it in these words. And so this is also a sign that international solidarity and international cooperation are most important keys also for Ukraine and to solve the problem, not only in Ukraine, also in Europe and perhaps in other parts of the world, when others are doing like we are doing. These are my last words, and I thought it was very impressive listening to you all and seeing how strong this community has become in the last years. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wolfgang, so much for these great words, great ending of our so rich discussion, which I believe is one more step towards bringing more people to commit themselves to really take a real action in the face of aggression of tyranny and authoritarianism. And yes, thank you so much, and thank you, Roger, for everything. And I would love to thank everybody else here that was part of this conference. And please, Roger, make your final greetings to our participants. I didn't want to make any concluding remarks after Wolfgang's wonderful intervention, but yeah, since we...
Well, just to say thank you, Javier, and thank you, Wolfgang, and everyone. Just to remind us that we've come together today to remember Ukraine, to remember what has happened over the last 4 years, the resilience of the Ukrainian people. How wonderful to hear that there is a note of optimism that the new Ukraine is emerging from the old, even in the teeth of this conflict. We've come here to remember, to unite, as Wolfgang told us, to act in solidarity, and to act by signing the declaration on the Defending Democracy Global website. That is an action that you can take, and to take responsibility moving forward, to stick with this, to stick with Ukraine, continue to encourage our politicians, our MPs, our governments to support Ukraine and to support ourselves, and to do whatever is necessary to stand with Ukraine now and in the future, because in defending Ukraine, we are defending ourselves. Indeed, we are defending the liberal democratic order, which is the only thing that can really keep us safe in the future, in a rapidly changing world where the stakes are high between authoritarianism and democracy. We know which side we're on, and we know that we must defend Ukraine, and now is the time to take responsibility, and now is the time to act. So thank you very much for the action you've taken this evening, and the action that you can take in the future. Thank you, and good night.
Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini.
Bye. Thanks. See you soon.